here in my garage, or the parking structure. I thought I'd do a little video on the new Magnuson Supercharger that I just put into this truck. You know, there's not a lot of info out there about how it's actually laid out and installed. My buddy, I hired my buddy to install this at his shop. Yeah, it's a great setup. So I guess I'll just start going over it right now. As you can see, I retained the stock airbox, and that's because most of the people who got the Supercharger back in the day did it at a Toyota dealership. So the TRD tune was based off of the stock airbox. So we've got the stock airbox, and it's got a K&N oiled filter. But the process to install this thing is basically you take off the engine cover, that plastic thing, and then you work your way down through the intake manifold and injectors and all that stuff. And the kit comes with new spark plugs and new injectors. I believe they're, I think 550 cc's. And then you bolt the new Supercharger on top of all that stuff. And there's a few things that you have to do to the truck in order to make all of the belts, pulleys, cooling, and all that stuff work. So basically what they do is the Supercharger bolts into where the intake manifold would have been. And you can see that they also supply a plumbing kit for the air cooler. And that is a liquid cooled inner charger or a charge air cooler. And what happens is all this new stuff gets put in, the belt, the tensioner, the Supercharger pulley, the new crank pulley, and then what happens is they route the charge air cooler to a heat exchanger. I don't know if you can see that, but in front of the radiator. So that first layer of cooling, there's a lot of cooling up front here. Yeah. So this is a TRD off-road. I think there might be a transmission cooler up in there somewhere. I'm not sure, but I mean, from this vantage point, I see 3 coolers up here, right? So there's the charge air cooler for the, or the air to water air cooler for the Supercharger, then something behind that, and then and then I think the third row is the radiator. Yeah, there's a lot of cooling up in here. But what happens is there's actually a send and return hose from the Supercharger, and what happens is it goes into a radiator reservoir, which is it's a separate loop or isolated loop for the Supercharger itself. And then there's actually a pump. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. There's an actual pump. Yeah, that's the pump. Which pumps the fluid through the cooler. And on my specific installation, I have a light bar. Where's the light bar? There it is. I have a light bar down here. The bracket that Magnuson supplied actually puts the pump right where the light bar is. So we modified that a little bit just to raise it up a little bit. And then that worked out pretty well. I drove this thing, after I installed this supercharger, we drove this thing around. I drove it around for about a couple 100 miles. And then I drove from LA to Vegas and back. Unfortunately, that was not a party trip, that was a work trip, so I didn't get to hang out in the desert too much. But it was basically just a like 24 to 36 hour trip. And I was a little bit concerned about this new install. You know, I had my satellite phone with me and my cell phone just in case something bad were to happen, but nothing bad happened. However, on the way back, I got back here, and then, you know, I unpacked the truck and went to bed, and then I went out the next day just to, you know, get some food or whatever, and then the clutch fell to the floor. So, just a note on the Tacoma clutches, I had a bad master cylinder. It was leaking, clutch was at the floor. To Toyota's credit, the truck still drove, the clutch is fine. The clutch itself, the disc and friction plate and all that stuff is fine. But the pedal was just at the floor, and it was engaging like half and like maybe an inch off the floor. Anyways, I took that to just a regular, you know, neighborhood Toyota mechanic, and they replaced the master cylinder and replaced clutch fluid. This was like, I mean, it was like brown earlier. Probably looks brown on the camera right now because it's late at night, but yeah, it was great. So I've got a couple of notes here. Oh yeah, so I had another video where I looked at, or it was in the cab. I mounted my GoPro to the cab, the back of the cab, and just was driving around, and I was talking about how we actually installed this thing. So yeah, my buddy did all the hard part installation. We ran it on the stock ECU for a couple of days. So we monitored the long-term injector fuel trim on the OBD2 scanner. And it was fine. It was like, you know, compensating for a little bit extra air on the, it was compensating for a little bit of extra capacity on the fuel injectors, so it was trimming it down, which was good. So I drove it home and talked to some people on Tacoma World, and there's a guy called Just DSM, that's his handle on Tacoma World, and he reflashed the ECU with the TRD Supercharger tune, which Magnuson. I believe this is an Eaton root style blower. Magnuson did the kit, and I think they OEM'd with Toyota. for the TRD kit. So it's basically just a drop-in replacement for the TRD kit, which they discontinued a few years ago. Anyways, they, just DSM on Tacoma World reflashed the ECU and did a couple of modifications with the HP tuner package, which is great. So far, so good. One thing to know about this setup is that you need the highest octane that you can get at the pump. So whether it's 91 or 93, you definitely need higher octane. And if you drive your truck a lot, if it's a commuter, or you do extremely long road trips all the time, that is something to keep in mind. I just drive this thing around town and take it on trips, every 2 or 3 months. So that's not such a big deal to me, but if you're putting thousands of miles on your truck every month or every few months, that's definitely going to be a consideration. One thing that I need to do in the future is a bigger fuel pump and an external fuel filter. These injectors are pretty big. They're 550cc, I believe, and the stock fuel filter or fuel injectors are quite a bit smaller. So, driving around normally, not really a big deal. And obviously I don't floor this thing all over town, so it's not a huge deal. But for the for long-term reliability and just performance and avoiding failure, you're gonna want to get the bigger fuel pump and external filter and all that stuff. I believe URD sells a kit. I've actually got a StopTech brake kit, big brake kit on order. It should be coming here within the next few days, and I've got to figure out how I'm going to install that, whether I'll do it myself or take it to somebody. I don't know. Depends on how much time and money is involved, but yeah, this thing is awesome. It sounds great. Even with the stock airbox, stock muffler, which is the non-TRD muffler, from inside the cab, you can hear the whine. Obviously, you can feel the torque, and it's great. So I guess what I'll do is I'll try to turn this thing on and just give you a shot of it running. Okay, thanks for watching.